this evening. This, for us, a rather unusual session. Raza Foundation normally does not launch books. However, this is an exception, and a very happy exception at that. What is going to be launched is an anthology of translation into English from, if my count is proper, 33 languages, 68 poets. So this is perhaps one of the largest anthologies to appear in India in English, of poetry other than of English. So it's an important occasion. I'm reminded of the fact that in Hindi, for the past more than 40 years, there's a journal called Tanav, which has, over the years, decided to have each issue devoted to translation of poetry from somebody or the other. They have translated so much that I wanted that should not be lost in the journal. So I asked the editor, a person called Vanshi Maheshwari. He lives in Pune now, because his daughter works there or something like that. And I told him to choose 1,000 poems. But finally, he ended up by choosing 1340 pages. So we have published that in 3 volumes. They are called दरवाजे में कोई चाबी नहीं, प्यास में मरती एक नदी, प्यास से मरती एक नदी, और सूखी नदी पर खाली नाव. There has been in Hindi itself a very large number of significant poets who, apart from writing poetry, have also translated. About some of them, I could mischievously say they had better translate than write themselves. But that's your opinion. And it includes a very large number of poets, from Agge, Shamsher, you have Dhanbir Bhakti, Shrikant Verma, Raghuvi Sahai, Kamlesh, Vishnu Khare, etc. Arun Kamal, even I, in my 13-volume complete works, which are not complete, has a whole volume of only translations. So translation has become almost an important job for significant poets. Now, I am reminded of 2 things. Octavio Paz famously said the 20th century is the biggest century of translation in human history. And incidentally, in English itself, most translations of poetry take place, they get published in the United States. Britain has always been a little reluctant and quite self-satisfied in that sense. Although, if you remember, modern poetry translation, and it created a global impact. But before that, more importantly, it was the New Direction books, which created a whole literary world in a certain sense. So he said, the 20th century is the biggest century of translation, and also went on to say that it is not only literature, ideas, knowledge, philosophy that is being translated, but also lifestyles, customs, cuisines, costumes. They are also translated. In fact, most of us, barring the ladies, wear translated costumes. in a sense. But he also said, and those were the days when it was said that poetry is lost in translation. He said poetry is what survives translation. So, and if this were not so, look at the world impact of some of the poets of the West. You have any number of them, from Rilke, Eliot, Bertolt Brecht, Pablo Neruda, Octavio Paz, Eugene Herbert, etc., etc. And one interesting thing that I noticed is about Rilke. I have 8 or 9 English translations of Rilke Duono elegies and sonnets to Orpheus. Every 3-4 years, some poet decides to translate again. And it's very interesting. If you pick up, let's say, 4th elegy, and you pick up done by so-and-so, done by now so-and-so, so-and-so, and they have a different intonations and all that. So in a manner of speaking, the concept of world literature, if at all, is a concept which is critically based on translation. There cannot be a world literature without translation. And I want to give you 2 examples from India, what translation did. First one is a translation of Upanishads by Darashikoh in Persian. A French traveler happened to be in India, and he was able to get a copy. So he took the Persian manuscript, there were only manuscripts, there were no books, to Paris. It got translated into French, but more importantly, it got translated into Latin. It was this Latin translation that was read by Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer then started taking interest in Indian metaphysics and Indian. Once there was a seminar here, and there was a paper read by an Italian art historian who talked about Beethoven and India. So they were very surprised that Beethoven had anything to do with India. It turned out that when Beethoven was passing through a very depressing phase after having composed some great music earlier, when he was passing through depression, he started reading translations of Upanishads, Kalidas, etc. And his notebook called Tagebuch, or whatever in the German, there are 4 passages recorded, including Nasdi Su, etc. And he wrote in it that I want to create an ensemble of religious voices from India, etc. Again, the second example is of Kabir. Kabir was first translated into English by no less a person than Rabindranath Tagore. The 100 poems of Kabir, they were published in London, I think in 1914. He got the Nobel in 1913? 13. Yeah, so just a year later. And this book actually is the world entry of Kabir. Because after that, Kabir was translated to French, into Polish, into German, etc., etc. And there was a large number of interests. So if translation were not there, in other words, Upanishads would not have entered the world as they did after the Persian translation. And secondly, Kabir would not have entered the globe, as it were, if Rabindranath had not translated. So translations have these incredible, and look at some of the forms have also been, in a manner of speaking, translated. Sonnet, ghazal, even Lorca wrote ghazals. Some of the Spanish poets under the Moorish influence. And haiku. Haiku has become a genre, but it came to us through translation. So whether you like it or not, the world we live in is both for its creativity, for its imagination, with that linguistic skill, for its broad vision, for its humanizing influences, depends on translation. And therefore we are here to celebrate. Even the dragon has a heart. so the dragon's heart, which, as I said, contains a wealth of poetry from various languages. So there you are.
Let's open our books and be happy about it.
Since I have mine.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
It's inverted. Yeah, your book now.
Thank you. Yes. This is what I love about it. Miss printing and Miss like.
I want to preserve the paper.
One of your translations.
When the reading starts, right?
No, then you won't do it. Read Rahul's.
I told her that in Raza Foundation activities, I don't read my poems and so on. Except for doing this talking on liberation.
This is a
between
translation.
They're not selling it here.
But she insists,
Now they have some
since we have supported this,
I think you should read. Which page is it on? You got the page? What about the, not the name for the week? Which one would you like to do?
no, this is it.
Yeah.
This is good. It's a short one, and it's a shameless love poem. So, all the book. The other name for awakening. The original title, I think, in Hindi is Jagrana ka dusra naam. In her eyes is the dense green darkness that shades the river waters. The sweat of her palms is the water of spring flowing silently in forests. On her lips is the imprint of dew falling late at night. At the touch of her hands, colors come alive, shapes come alive, countless heartbeats quicken. She is the other name for awakening.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and delighted that Ashok read this poem, which I think can be a love poem to a person or the earth herself, our planet, that is entirely of our love. And we've done this book of translations, but one of the reasons we've done this book of translations is because there are so many ways of translating and so many cultures. Each culture approaches translation differently. And I found that fabulously fascinating. And it could be a way of resistance, but I'll come to this later. First, I want to really thank you, Ashokji, and the Raza Foundation, not only for organizing the launch, but also for sharing a vision of building a poetry community through uploading poetry on the online journal Poetry at Sangam. Earlier hosted by the Writers' Residency Sangam House, it is now an open access archive, independent, and as always, free. And the Raza Foundation, I must say, has supported Poetry at Sangam for 7 of its 10 years of existence. You might have forgotten that, Ashokji, but it's that, you know, and that's made us do our work. And what did we do there? I began it, but when Mrinalini also joined, we shared a similar ideas about searching for poetry that was experimental, linguistically so, formally so, that was intense, that was beautiful, moving emotionally and spiritually. And issue by issue, slowly we built up this, or shall I say, a master treasury of over 3,000 poems and many audio recordings, along with notes by guest editors, besides our own introductions to each contributor's poetry. You know, this was important to introduce it. Unlike Western tradition, sometimes, which I sometimes find very, shall I say, colonialistic. You just plunge into a work without any introduction. No. In the subcontinent, I think you always have context. In this tree, under that branch, below that stone, lived a little mouse, which, for example, we have context. And we wanted to give context to these poems and also let the reader get in the widest possible way into the poetry. So this is absolutely a work of love, not just by me, and Mrinalini, but also the contributors, and there's Apurva there, also contributor, and our guest editors who have always largely given their work to us to build a poetry community. And we deeply appreciate the solidarity. At times of difficulty, it's been a kind of a cloak of comfort for me. And at all times, it's been a joy that there is this poetry community, that there is this friendship across oceans, across languages. There are people who think alike, who will come to help and support. And that is why I think we live up to our name, Poetry at Sangam, because Sangam, as you know, means confluence. And here, I think, is a confluence of poetic styles, languages, visions of the word of poetry coming alive. This book, The Dragon's Heart, comprises of translations that we've gathered from Poetry at Sangam, not all of them. We culled it. And Mrinalini and I once again acknowledge our contributors, our translators, our poets, who have been with us from start to finish, without whom it could not have happened. And it took us 3 years of intense, shall we say, labor, Mrinalini, to put this together. And we also thank our publisher of Jadavpur University, sorry, Dr. Abhijit Gupta, who couldn't be here with us today because some of you might know that there's trouble on the campus in Jadavpur University, and things aren't flowing quite as they should. In fact, we also have a problem getting our books out here. So we're trying to make arrangements for those who want to write down their names, and we'll talk about how we can handle that later. But it is this solidarity which really which holds me up. And you might wonder, Ashokji mentioned it, The Dragon's Heart. Why this odd title for an anthology of world poetry in translation? I read Daphne's story when I was 8 years old. Daphne, the dragon. He lives in Norse mythology in the Volsunga saga, which was written down in the 13th century, but obviously there were earlier iterations in the oral traditions. And now, Fafnir is a pretty typical dragon. He breathes fire, he holds wealth, he is greedy, but he also has a secret. And in this part of the story, he runs into Sigurd, blue-eyed hero, as all heroes are meant to be, so they tell us. And Sigurd was commanded by his wicked uncle and king to kill Sigurd, to kill Fafnir and bring the dragon's heart to him. And when he was doing this, I mean, there's always a lot of blood and gore in these tales, aren't there? So when he was doing this, Sigurd accidentally tasted a drop of Fafnir's blood. Just one drop went into his mouth. And with that one drop of heart's blood, he immediately understood what the birds around him were saying. He understood the stories, the tales, the tongues of all the animals around, and all the human tongues. So, Daphne, therefore, to me, opens up as a tale of possibilities and potentials ripped from death's dark toe. It's a tale against forgetting, against discrimination, against marginalizing, against othering. And it suggests a way of navigating the plurality of cultural experience while bestowing wisdom. So Fafnir's tale, I think, becomes a story against loss, which translation also is, because it opens up our imagination to polyvocality and multiple ways of understanding the world we live in, and multiple cultures, the way they view the concept of translation itself. And also, therefore, the idea of mistranslation comes into play, whether it's deliberate, whether it is put in by mistake, and that, of course, is a different game altogether, which we shall get into later, or maybe another time. So among the ways of translating, mine, and I know some others, it's a way of surrender and sundering the self to the text. And completely open yourself up to the text, and then as you open yourself up to the text, I found that the text opens itself up more and more and more to you and enfolds you. And out of this mutual embrace, shall I say, comes a new being, a new creation, is rebirth under a different sky. And this rebirthing is what I'd like to focus on too. One of the cornerstones of this anthology is the kind of ways we can do it, this rebirthing or this retelling or this versioning or this completely new idea of writing a poem. There's so many ways of doing it. Because we know translation is always a complex, shifting process, a kaleidoscope of almost innumerable variables and patterns. And we find one pattern or two patterns that we put together, but there are many patterns there. So this book, The Dragon's Heart, is as much about the art and craft of translation as the poems in translation. I want to make this point because we resist the primacy of often accorded to the translated product, but not the translated process. And this is significant. We want to bring into focus the act of rebirthing, the act of translation itself. Also, all are translators of poets themselves. So each one brings into their work their own practice, their own practice. It is every poem is informed by their practice. And also another aspect that we were very keen on was we did not want a single smooth editorial tone running through the anthology, which we have in most anthologies. Why was this? Because I think, for instance, there are many variables, but time is one of the variables. The textures of time between urban experience, those closer to nature, and in indigenous traditions is viewed differently. The Englishes used in these different areas and cultures are different, and therefore, but the translation of these Englishes don't actually weigh out the same in power, terms of power. The urban is given more, is privileged, but we did not want that. So we wanted rather to attempt a balance in the power equations between the source language and its English interpretation to retain the ecologies of the language as close as possible. Therefore, we request each translator to provide a translator's reflection that guides us into their practice, politics, locale, cultural specificity, the registers they use, and further context is provided by the guest editors and our editorial introductions. So it's a nuanced approach, I think, we give, and one that helps you get in deeper, I hope. You'll also find that there are some translations with footnotes, while others follow a more Indic mode, where we don't necessarily have footnotes and annotations, but these are incorporated in the text. You'll find a multiplicity of the ways of translation. And we know, as Ashokji was also saying, that Fafnir Smith takes on an urgency and added significance as the world grows increasingly intolerant of diversity and hate speech increases. And we also know that there are market imperatives, cultural imperialism and globalism that seek to homogenize the landscape of the mind. Poetry in translation resists this. It pushes back. It resists this by offering the imaginations and literary landscapes of various cultures. It offers ways of becoming more than oneself and rejoices in our shared humanity. It offers ways to live, I think, in the fullness of being, and ways to love the world. We offer you the dragon's heart. Thank you. Mrinalini, would you? My guest editor, without whom again this anthology wouldn't have happened. So.
Thank you, Priya. This anthology, I confess, is entirely Priya. I've just been in for it for the last 2 years. And I would like to thank Ashokji for giving us the space to share it with you. So, in the last couple of years in which I was part of Poetry Sangam and culling of this anthology, I learned a few things. So, I'll quickly share that with you. The true glory of a language is found in its poetry. When we seek to understand the psyche of a people, we turn to poetry that has been passed down through generations, poetry that forms the very foundation of a culture. So consider the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, dating back to 2100 BC. Think of the epic traditions in Greece, such as the Iliad, the Odyssey, closer to home, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Then there are the Jain and Buddhist Tamil classics, Shilapatikaram, Manimekalai, and some European classics like Dante's Divine Comedy and the Os Lusíadas and Camões from Portugal. The Book of Songs from China, often attributed to Confucius, captures a profound philosophical perspective of life. Indic worldviews refract cultural perspectives, while minimalist beauty shines through in Japanese haiku and speaks about the culture's deep appreciation for simplicity. In the Arab world, the poet or shair held immense cultural power, and during the Islamic Sultanate eras, the ghazal flourished as an exquisite poetic form. The Sufis too sang their poetry as a form of spiritual expression, often positioned as a counterpoint to the perceived orthodoxy of mainstream religion. Poetry introduces us to the rhythms of a land, its position in the world, its philosophies, and the human reactions to life. It tells us of the people's losses, laments, joys, and hopes. It captures what they find beautiful and meaningful. Translation, we know, therefore, plays a pivotal role in bringing this poetry across boundaries. It transcends linguistic barriers, fosters understanding, creating unity even in diversity. Translating poetry is very different from translating prose. It can be argued that it is more challenging. Besides meaning, the translator has to consider elements like rhyme, meter, and affect, but the poem treads with nuance and mystery to become more than its parts. To be done well, it requires two immense things of the translator. Intelligence of craft, that is, and respect for the source text. Over the ages, translation has shaped cultures, from the Rosetta Stone to the Bible, from 1001 Nights to the great literary classics, as Ashokji had mentioned. And translations have connected us across time and space. Today we are living in a remarkable age where translations have never been so widespread, giving us unprecedented access to literature across the world. Once more this year, the International Booker Prize features a work from an international Indian language translated into English in the running. This contemporary focus on inclusivity is shifting the conversation beyond the importance of translation toward a new dimension, the methodologies of translation. Traditional Sangam poetics, for instance, offers a profound three-pronged approach to translation. The literal, which strives for word-for-word rendering, as close to the original as possible. The interpretive, which grants room for creative reformulation and idiomatic expression, a sort of transliteration. And the metonymic, wherein equivalence of meaning and feeling take precedence over word-for-word accuracy. In this approach, entire phrases may shift so that the adaptation feels natural and slides off the tongue easily in the target language. Please take a look at my colleague Priya Sarukkai Chabria's excellent seminal contemporary translation of Andal, an 8th century Tamil Bhakti poet. And on a very personal note, this work of hers opened me up to the dynamic possibilities of translation. The Dragon's Heart, a project that features a rich array of subcontinental and non-Indian languages, brings us face to face with the diversity of worldviews. Some of these languages, like Hindi and Spanish, are widely spoken. Others, like Dogri from Jammu or Tohono or Dam from Arizona's Sonoran Desert, are spoken by finitely smaller communities. Yet through translation, we are not merely peeking into these languages and cultures, we are experiencing them through the colored lens of the translator's voice. From the translator's reflections that precede the entries in the book, we gain insight into how a particular translator has played a role of linguistic envoy, We see an employment of varying methods from literal to creative to bridge these divides. For instance, Vivek Narayan's translation of the Kuruntokai is deliberately literal and fragmented. He says, if previous translations tended to rearrange the poems towards quick comprehension, smooth over their sharp and startling switches between hot and cold speech, quiet imagery, and inevitably unpack a terse poem gently into a greater number of lines, I have attempted to provide a raw, closer experience, pushing as far as I can without breaking comprehension. His reasoning cleanly slices through the water. He continues to say, it is simply to better discover and learn from the poem's own astonishing strategies in their leaps, feints, slants, and disjunctions. They can sound surprisingly avant-garde to my ear. Alternatively, from the Occitan, a medieval language that spreads net-like across parts of France, Italy, Spain, and Monaco, poet Aurelia Lassac subverts the hero's journey from Homer's Odyssey. She creates its alloy with a modern and intimate conversation between Ulysses and an invented she. Where the hero talks of war, the she breaks away with interiority. This re-envisioning captures the essence of the myth while injecting a present-era personal voice, transforming the ancient into something uniquely resonant. On another note, Akhil Hatyal's translation of Manglesh Dabral's poem from Hindi takes a poetic leap. In his translation of Dabral's poem, Chumwan, The Kiss, he interprets the poem not as a specific kiss between two people, but as a universal, transcendent kiss. As he explains in his words, Mangleshji's poem was not about a particular kiss between particular people, which would have allowed the impulse of a man and a woman. It was a kiss as universal, a kiss beyond history, kiss as transcendent. I took my cue from this and deliberately made an error. It is a text unfaithful to words, but not to meaning, the translator's brief. The translator as actor in the translation goes up a significant notch with Anjali Purohit's translation of Kanhupatra. She says, I have chosen to adopt in this translation a form where I transpose my own words into her verses, attempt to merge our two voices, two eras in time, the past and the present, in order to suggest a confluence where concerns can be seen to be shared. The result of this heteroglossia is a hybrid poem, a mixing of two voices, an attempt to reconcile poetic truths deeply felt across time periods. And in the case of Mariko Nagai, a translator who adapts the structure of Japanese haiku to reflect gender nuances, we see how the art of translation evolves, breaking traditional rules to highlight a deeper truth. You will find in her translator's reflections, once you get the book, Mariko explains how this break from the 5-7-5 syllabic structure becomes an act of feminist intervention, challenging the conventions of language itself. Through all these methods, translation becomes more than the act of transferring words. It is also an act of reinvention, as Priya mentioned, a means of bringing distant worlds into closer, more intimate contact with one another. In sum, translation is not just about language, it is about connection. It is through the careful and thoughtful work of translators that we are able to see the beauty, the pain, and the wisdom of other cultures reflected in our own. And in a world increasingly divided by difference, this is a powerful gift, one that offers the promise of unity, understanding, and shared humanity. We now have readings from the book. We're very grateful to our contributors for taking time out to be with us today. We had Ashokji read from his work. And we have poet, translator, and publisher of Red River Press, Dibyajyoti Sarma, who will read from the Assamese. And we'll have poet, translator, Professor Maaz Bin Bilal, who will read from the Urdu. And we'll have poet critic and feminist theorist, Dr. Savita Singh, who will read from the Hindi. So may I call upon Dibyajyoti Sarma to offer some Assamese translation.
First of all, I mean, how do I say? Thank you, Priya, for doing this and taking on this work that you have been doing for, for so long. The poetry at Sangam, the website, and everything, I've been following it since the beginning. And then, I was always dreamed of, being a part of that. And then finally, you made my dream come true. And when you asked me to find an Assamese author and translate it, jumped on the opportunity. And thank you for inviting me to do that and be part of this galaxy of writers. And this is I translated an Assamese poet called Lutfa Hanum Salima Begum. So thanks to Priya again, because while searching for a poet to translate, so I found her, and then after translating this poem, now we are working on a full-length book of her translation. So I am asked to read a translator's note also. I'll briefly read a couple of paragraphs from it, and then I read one poem. I started translating when I was studying literature in Pune. Those days, translation for me was a way of keeping in touch with my mother tongue. It was an emotional exercise. The approach remained the same. So I would call my translation populist rather than literary. My first allegiance is to the target language. The translation should flow in it. It should not sound broken or awkward. Therefore, I try to avoid using local indigenous words as much as possible unless they are an integral part of the text. Second, the translation should be faithful to my emotional response to the text, not what the poem meant, but what I, as a reader, received from the poem. As far as languages go, Assamese and English are completely different language. Assamese is more emotional language. We tend to repeat sentences, phrases, words for maximum impact. We tend to use excessive adjectives. English, on the other hand, the old and clinical language, it demands precision. Again, Assamese sentences make perfect sense without subject or verb. This doesn't work in English. So as a translator, I have to make choices. In this case of this poem, however, there were no radical choices involved. So I'll go back to the poem. It's a poem called House. Okay, and here it goes. You build a house, put up a nameplate on the gate, a lock at the gate at night to prevent the pleasures of fulfillment from escaping. You build a house, you are no longer homeless, but your anxieties have soared. Without reason, you go crazy thinking about the house you want to go out when at home and can't wait to return home when you are out. Even in the house, you are drenched in the rainfall of worries. The spring leaves of your dreams desiccate, even in the morning sun. The bullets of terror hits you. The bullets of terror hit you within your house. You don't understand. The house's existence is concrete. Yours isn't. Truth cannot pretend a lie, and they cannot cohabit. A house is static and resolute. You are uncertain and erratic. A house is mute, and you are full of noise. Still, one day perhaps, you will remain hanging as an oil painting on the wall of the house you built. Perhaps, or perhaps not. Thank you.
Like Divya, I'd like to begin by thanking Priya for this incredible work. That not just, of course, this anthology, but also the incredible work which she did with you with the Poetry at Sangam website for 10 years. And so I teach at a university where I get students who from fairly privileged backgrounds. But be it from any background, I don't see enough people, and I'm always trying to encourage my students, often failing to do so, just to put in work, creative work, and just the value of creative labor, whether it be rewarded monetarily or not, or in any which way. But just the fact that you're able to apply yourself for this long at a task in a sustained manner, and Portrait Sangam achieves such a high quality and standard as well, it's truly, I think, incredible and must be applauded greatly. So with that, I'll move to my translator's note is rather brief. I write poetry in English, I write ghazals in English, and the translations that are included in this anthology are from the poet Rahat Indori's work, and all of them are ghazals. So the note also talks about that. Rahat Indori was a people's poet who spoke truth about power. I've translated some of his popular ghazals here that reflected with easy enough allusions and rhymes and refrains of the ghazal form on the oppressions of the state. I sought to retain the form and the essential share or verse couplets with the rhyme scheme of the original Urdu to give an impression not just of the sense, but also of the incantatory slogan-like poetics of Indori, which resonated deeply with his fans. I'm reading the translation of the ghazal, which is even quoted inside the parliament. Agar khilaf hone do, jaan thodi hai, ye sab dhua hai, aasmaan thoda hi hai. That's the first share. If they are against, let them be. If they are against, let them be. It's not the end of life. This is all smoke, not the sky this night. If there's fire, then other homes too shall burn. The houses here are not all mine. I know the enemy isn't lesser, but they don't wear their life easy like mine. What comes out of our mouths has the power of truth. What comes out of our mouths has the power of truth. The tongue in my mouth is in thine. Today's masters of the throne won't be here tomorrow. Today's masters of the throne won't be here tomorrow. They're tenants. It's not their right divine. Everyone's blood is mixed in the soil here. Everyone's blood is mixed in the soil here. Hindustan's not your dad's, not mine. Thank you.
Good evening. I was so happy listening to everything that was being said over here. Indeed, it is. I just received this copy yesterday and I looked through it. And I think, I don't know whether I should say a beautiful book or a handsome book. I always think in these very gendered ways, but I think it is both. So it's a wonderful collection of poetry in translation. And I haven't come across a book like this. So, a little hyperbolic, but I think it is true, largely that it is quite a wonderful book, and the standards are maintained from first page to the last. When Priya asked me to guest edit one issue, that was when Corona had just set in.
Yes.
And it was such a tough time for all of us. But I thought, maybe it is a silver line. Maybe I should take it up. It's a way to deal with something that poetry always comes to, save us, ultimately. So that is how I took it. And then she had left. She had given me freedom to choose. To envision a particular issue and all that, for which I'm very grateful to her also, because I like to work in freedom and because I like to create freedom, situations of freedom for others. So I told her that, look, I think I'll do an issue in which I'll have women poets, at least 7, from different languages of our country, and put them together, and I'll write a brilliant edit for this particular issue. So all is brilliant, then let's go. So that's how I had a poet from Bangla, from Kannada, from Oriya, from Gujarati, from Hindi. I told her I shouldn't be there, but she insisted. So obviously then Medha's translation of my poems were included, which I'm going to read. Since Medha is not here, she lives in Edinburgh as it is called. She's a very good poet herself and a fantastic translator, and she's very dear to me. So there we are. So I've been asked to read the editor's note, which I will do. And so it's Medha's editorial note. And I'll read a little bit of narcissistic, but a little bit of what Priya has written. Priya's editorial notes are also very specific because there are just so many notes that she has written, and all of them exquisite. So Priya has to say something nice about me. That is, I was saying, don't want to be narcissistic, but this is how it is. So, and you know, Priya had in fact forgotten that there were also recordings of these poems, which were, which is like unique thing to do. I mean, you've done everything possible. Yeah.
There's lots more to do.
Yeah, for poetry at Sangam.
Thank you.
So Priya writes, Dr. Savita Singh is a remarkable poet, feminist, theorist and teacher, was Poetry at Sangam's April 2020 issue guest editor. Along with her curation of 6 women poets translated from various Indian languages, we carried her own poems, translated from the Hindi by her daughter, poet Savita Singh. I mentioned the familial connection, and this is very important. I mentioned the familial connection to emphasize the giving and taking of language in this close bond. It's a terrific feminist acknowledgement of how women write, how women edit, how women come together, how women create a world, constantly create a world of verse through this kind of solidarity and collaboration, which perhaps makes the original at once dearer yet more determinedly distanced from the translator to create her version, as if she is holding a twin streams in her mind. Or do they merge with Medha's special knowledge of her mother's artistic terrain, lit by professional ethics to deepen the flow beneath these fine translations? Savita's use of ellipses acts like invisible stepping stones to take the reader from the everyday anger, protest and hurt towards the other bank of metaphysical which she also inhabits. Thank you. Yeah. The translator's reflection by Savita Singh. I am normally rather cautious about writing a preface to translated works, even though it's a standard practice in this field. But to my view, it is counterintuitive to do so in that the translator's voice then preempts the poet's. I fear infecting the experience of the reader, the one and clear chance we have to plunge into the soaring and wide imaginative world of the poet. It's only possible without interruption. Poetry, both the writing and reading of it, are two different meditative practices. In this case, it is all true for Savita Singh's universe. These poems are part of a longer work, and one that I feel necessary to comment on for appropriate contextualization. At first glance, these poems reflect that great feminine empathy deployed to serve a feminine purpose. However, these poems defy at the same time such a banal and superficial reading. They actively resist criticism and the metaphysical universe as it relates to the body. In Singh's poems, one finds an assured magic realist stance that is distinctly androgynous. And she set out one day with a poem which I will read. Singh declaims how a snake shrugs off its scales. Similarly, the spirit unclothes a previous being. The woman in a full being, only gendered by the body. The woman is a full.
Better.
Can we just hear this bit again, because we couldn't get what you said.
Sorry, maybe I should be a little distant. Yes, distant. Okay. However, these poems, is it okay?
Much better.
Much better. Okay. However, these poems defy at the same time such a banal and superficial reading. They actively resist criticism in apprehending the metaphysical universe as it relates to the body. In Singh's poems, one finds an assured magic lyricist dance that is distinctly endogenous. And she set out one day, Singh disclaims how a snake shrugs off its scales, similarly the spirit unclothes a previous being. The woman is a full being, only gendered by the body. Her mind, once unaware of it, having shed body consciousness, is free to roam, is free to be, flaring beyond its biological and material dimensions. In these two lines is the entire thrust and torque of freedom, which is in singular goal towards women's emancipation, especially considering the plight of the working class body, leads us out of this boring fabrication of a world into pure life, pure living. That's what she writes. Love you, Meta, wherever you are. Thank you. The poem that, the last poem of the thing, of the bunch that she did. And this is about a woman who goes out for a sad, tafri, just look at that. And to me, tafri is the great act of freedom and willfulness, as far as women are concerned. So, उसका हिंदी में है, एक दिन वह सैर पर निकली. That's the title. She sets out one day. How trees finish shedding after a time is how snake shrugs off its scales. Similarly, the spirit unclothes a previous being. Easily, the sad soul, she rid herself of the old touch of the body itself. All had renewed swiftly, no guilt, no regret, none sprang. She dried her long hair for a long while in the sun one day. One day, she set out, passing through mustard fields, all the way up to the old lake. Upon returning, she sang her favorite song for hours. She continued on reading Mahadevi one day. On another, she went to meet her mother, and to meet several others she hadn't the chance to in a while. One night, returning late after an evening show, having eaten a meal made of quotidian things, she made herself a cup of Darjeeling tea. Until dawn, she heard the singing of Kundanlal Sehgal and Malka Pukhraj. Her body was content after such a long time, and with the premonition of total contentment. At that time, I would like to read one poem, in Kannada.
I think we'll do one round, and then we'll,
That's the last one I would like to read.
There will be no time. Then you read a Chinese. You read a from the Chinese.
All right.
Go. So she has a chance to. Thank you. I mean, I'm deeply glad for everyone who's come, but the thing is that when you want to read poetry and you want to give your why you translate, which is a part of the raison d'etre of this book, then the poetry space kind of seems to get squeezed in. And I just want to thank you guys for coming, because it's a hugely important occasion for us. It's very, very significant, and I shall remember all your faces.
How to
Yeah.
get this book?
Huh?
How we shall announce, she will announce it in the end, how to get the book on Amazon.
Right now.
Sadly, just
Unfortunately, our
Amazon.
publisher isn't available to be present with us as there were problems on the campus, the JUP campus, and he was unable to arrange the books for us. However, this will be available on Amazon, and I'm available there with a notebook. If anyone would like to give me their name, their number, and their address, we'll arrange for a connection with the publisher so that you can take this forward with them.
So you'll get your copy.
Thank you.
So I'm here. So we have all of them have read in Indian.
Read the poem.
Uh,
Don't read the translator's note.
Okay. So, bringing up the international contingent over here, a poem by Yu Hua, translated by Liu Yuan Hao.
From mainland China.
The way they breathe.
Contemporary.
The way they breathe in this late autumn twilight, the way they swirl in the water for hours, and also the shudder of their shock when the stars appear. I shall be sunk deeper into this village, like a mud puddle into a mud pond. But I love the light on the edge of each leaf, as much as a glance passed by the world when I touch your fingertips. Such danger enthralls me and makes me want to turn everything upside down to rearrange it. But you remain silent, passing one mystery to another mystery in the same way that my defined praise of the world cannot relate to you. The part of the night where one aches is incomprehensible to you. Thank you.
Right, so I might just end with a very short poem here. It's one I'm doing with poet, translator, writer Shobana Kumar, translating from classical Tamil. And this is of the 9th century or 8th century mystic called Manikavachkar, whose name literally means he whose words are rubies. So he's held in great esteem in the South. And the way I've done it is I've of course kept his words, but as with the Bhakti tradition, I've added my own words to it. And my adding of my words and my name to it, I must insist, is not one of possession, but its opposite, release. Because it says, okay, this is Priya's translation. Now you take your shot at it, or you take your shot at it. It's just one translation of many. And this is called Tiritol Noki, the song of clapping, where he imagines he's a whole village of women. It's a snaking dance where the arm is put on the woman's shoulder in front of you, and they go like that. Small-minded Buddhists and the weak-headed sworn to other sects lurch in lies, stumble in desiccated faiths, stutter vacant words. Their systems are worthless. While I grow in glory, shed by Shiva's sight, even the shine, even the shadow of the sacred pond sends shivering bliss. My every action becomes penance, purified in the petri dish of devotion by the ocean of compassion. Clap, clap, clapping, we bend and rise. Clap, clap, clapping, we dance the kumi. Closing her eyes, Priya says, village women, bending and rising, like the snake of faith itself, now lost in longing, now sure. Sacred rapture, like poison, cannot be overcome. Thanks all of you. Thanks Ashokji. And thanks to the whole world and all the poets who were ever there, present, and all the translators before us, those known and unknown, and certainly those to come. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Have you got yours? You've got yours.